So, folks, there's this thing called Europe and Canada, and basically the world that is outside of the United States. And just because we are in this world all together, there's a certain requirement to interact with each other, with an acknowledgement that what affects one of us affects all of us, and we are interconnected in this ecosystem. No one nation is an island. You know. Anyway, Donald Trump has decided to attack Vladimir Zelenskyy and torch U.S. relations with the entire globe. And, yeah. Basically, Donald Trump is trying to claim that President Zelenskyy is a dictator and is, in fact, to blame for the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And, yeah, it's pretty wild. After saying Donald Trump said he was not going to cut President Zelenskyy out of negotiations with Russia, but then went to Saudi Arabia with Vladimir Putin to have negotiations without Vladimir Zelenskyy. So it's really weird that he emerged from that meeting parroting Russian talking points. So bizarre. But I think one of the things we really need to do here is that we need to actually take a look at what was the inciting event, and why are suddenly all the nations of the world turning their back on the United States. Let's take a look at a little event that happened just a few days ago. J.D. Vance went to Germany.
States, Mr. J.D. Vance, who was here last year as senator, and we are very happy that he has come back to Munich, and we are very much looking forward to his speech. Please welcome Vice President J.D. Vance.
Well, thank you, and thanks to all the gathered delegates and luminaries and media professionals, and thanks especially to the host of the Munich Security Conference for being able to put on such an incredible event. We're, of course, thrilled to be here. We're happy to be here. And, you know, one of the things that I wanted to talk about today is, of course, our shared values. And, you know, it's great to be back in Germany. As you heard earlier, I was here last year as United States Senator. I saw Foreign Secretary David Lammy and joked that both of us last year had different jobs than we have now. But now it's time for all of our countries, for all of us who have been fortunate enough to be given political power by our respective peoples, to use it wisely to improve their lives. And I want to say that, you know, I was fortunate in my time here to spend some time outside the walls of this conference over the last 24 hours. And I've been so impressed by the hospitality of the people, even as, of course, as they're reeling from yesterday's horrendous attack. And the first time I was ever in Munich was with my wife, actually, who's here with me today, on a personal trip. And I've always loved the city of Munich, and I've always loved its people. And I just want to say that we're very moved, and our thoughts and prayers are with Munich and everybody affected by the evil inflicted on this beautiful community. We're thinking about you, we're praying for you, and we will certainly be rooting for you in the days and weeks to come. Now, I hope that's not the last bit of applause that I get, but we gather at...
Dude, he knows exactly what he's been sent here to do. You know, like, he knows exactly what he's been sent here to do. Is this an old recording? This is from 5 days ago. So I guess, yes, it's ancient in streamer time, but you know what? I feel like it's important.
At this conference, of course, to discuss security. And normally, we mean threats to our external security. I see many great military leaders gathered here today. But while the Trump administration is very concerned with European security and believes that we can come to a reasonable settlement between Russia and Ukraine, and we also believe that it's important in the coming years for Europe to step up in a big way to provide for its own defense, the threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within.
So, dude is coming here while one of the global superpowers, or former global superpowers, is invading Ukraine to tell a bunch of German generals that he's not worried about the nuclear power invading another European country just a little bit away. And on top of that, he knows what he's been sent here to do, and he knows that it's going to be very unpopular, which is why he opens it up by saying, "Oh, I hope it's not the last time you applaud for me, haha," because he knows what he's been sent here to do. And he has been sent here bearing a torch with which to burn the relationship between the United States and all of Europe. Because he's saying the biggest threat isn't China, the biggest threat isn't Russia, the active invader, but it's all of you people. All of you Europeans, you're untrustworthy. You have dangerous elements within you. That's why you need to step up, because the United States can't trust you. You're too unstable.
The retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America. Now, I was struck that a former European commissioner went on television recently and sounded delighted that the Romanian government had just annulled an entire election. He warned that if things don't go to plan, the very same thing could happen in Germany, too. Now, these cavalier statements are shocking to American ears. For years, we've been told that everything we fund and support is in the name of our shared democratic values. Everything from our Ukraine policy to digital censorship is billed as a defense of democracy. But when we see European courts canceling elections and senior officials threatening to cancel others, we ought to ask whether we're holding ourselves to an appropriately high standard. And
yeah, you should just let Hitler have the chancellorship, okay? You should just let Hitler win the election. He's not going to do nothing. He's just a little Hitler. He's a birthday boy. Just let him win the election. That's the equivalent of what he's saying here, by the way. He's just a little mustache boy.
And I say ourselves because I fundamentally believe that we are on the same team. We must do more than talk about democratic values. We must live them. Now, within living memory of many of you in this room, the Cold War positioned defenders of democracy against much more tyrannical forces on this continent. And consider the side in that fight that censored dissidents, that closed churches, that canceled elections. Were they the good guys? Certainly not. And thank
He's drawing a parallel here between Ukraine and the Soviet Union. Fuck all the way off.
God, they lost the Cold War. They lost because they neither valued nor respected all of the extraordinary blessings of liberty. The freedom to surprise, to make mistakes, to invent, to build. As it turns out, you can't mandate innovation or creativity, just as you can't force people what to think, what to feel, or what to believe. And we believe those.
Unless, they believe gender ideology. Apparently transgender ideology, you can force people not to think that, apparently. You can force people not to be able to say things like that despite your commitment to the freedom of free speech. Weird.
Things are certainly connected. And unfortunately, when I look at Europe today, it's sometimes not so clear what happened to some of the Cold War's winners. I look to Brussels, where EU commissars warn citizens that they intend to shut down social media during times of civil unrest the moment they spot what they've judged to be, quote, hateful content. Or to this very country, where police have carried out raids against citizens suspected of posting anti-feminist comments online as part of, quote, combating misogyny on the internet, a day of action. I look to Sweden, where 2 weeks ago the government convicted a Christian activist for participating in Koran burnings that resulted in his friend's murder. And as the judge in his case chillingly noted,
I'm sorry, what?
Action, quote, combating misogyny on the internet, a day of action. I look to Sweden, where 2 weeks ago the government convicted a Christian activist for participating in Koran burnings that resulted in his friend's murder. And as the judge in his case chillingly noted, Sweden's laws to supposedly protect free expression do not, in fact, grant, and I'm quoting, a free pass to do or say anything without risking offending the group that holds that belief.
All of these people know exactly what's happening right now. Okay? All of these people know exactly what he's communicating. Which is exactly two things. 1 and 2. That's it. They know exactly what he's talking about. And you know what? Sweden has its own free speech laws. America also has free speech laws. Weirdly enough, J.D. Vance doesn't follow the constitutional free speech provisions in the United States. Weirdly enough, the politics he supports are perfectly comfortable banning mentions of transgender people. He is telling these people to fuck off. Russia is their better.
And perhaps most concerningly, I look to our very dear friends, the United Kingdom, where the backslide away from conscience rights has placed the basic liberties of religious Britons in particular in the crosshairs. A little over 2 years ago, the British government charged Adam Smith Connor, a 51-year-old physiotherapist and an Army veteran, with the heinous crime of standing 50 meters from an abortion clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes. Not obstructing anyone.
You know what? Let's take a look. Adam Smith Connor. A physiotherapist who prayed outside an abortion center has been convicted of breaching a safe zone after refusing requests to move on. Let's see. The 51-year-old from Southampton denied failing to comply with the order, but District Judge Orla Austin said on Wednesday his actions had been deliberate. Because the clinic said, hey, you are too close to us to do this. And then he did not move away from their private property. And I can't help but notice here, real quick, JD Vance absolutely 10,000% believes in castle doctrine here in the United States, which, if you're European, castle doctrine here in the US is the idea that if anyone is on your private property and you believe them to be a threat, you have the right to kill them. And, but in this case, well, he was just a whittle birthday boy. Just a whittle birthday boy. On the day, he was asked to leave the area by a community officer who spoke to him for an hour and 40 minutes. And then he refused. Like, I'm sorry, folks. A guy came over and talked to him for like the duration of a feature Hollywood film and told him, you need to move along. And he didn't. In America, people aligned with JD Vance believe that if you refuse to move after you are told to move by a police officer, you should be run over by a car. But in this case, it's a blatant violation of his rights. Yeah, all right, bud.
A 51-year-old physiotherapist and an Army veteran with the heinous crime of standing 50 meters from an abortion clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes. Not obstructing anyone, not interacting with anyone, just silent.
Okay, so he's just lying. He's just lying about the facts of the case.
Praying on his own. And after British law enforcement spotted him and demanded to know what he was praying for, Adam replied simply, it was on behalf of the unborn son he and his former girlfriend had aborted years before. Now, the officers were not moved. Adam was found guilty of breaking the government's new buffer zones law, which criminalizes silent prayer and other actions that could influence a person's decision within 200 meters of an abortion facility. He was sentenced to pay thousands of pounds in legal costs to the prosecution. Now, I wish I...
Just as an FYI, in case you're wondering about the buffer zone law, it requires people who want to do those prayers to be 200 meters away from the clinic. He's quite a bit closer than that.
I could say that this was a fluke, a one-off crazy example of a badly written law being enacted against a single person. But no, this last October, just a few months ago.
Bitch, you cannot complain about poorly written laws that affect one person. You guys badly write laws all the time that affect like one child in every state. Your anti-trans bills specifically affect like what? One national ban affects 12 athletes in college sports? The fuck is wrong with you? The double standards here are painful.
The Scottish government began distributing letters to citizens whose houses lay within so-called safe access zones, warning them that even private prayer within their own homes may amount to breaking the law. Naturally, the government urged readers to report any fellow citizens suspected guilty of thought crime. In Britain and across Europe, free speech...
I'm sorry, there is no law in Scotland against praying quietly in your own home. Fuck off, dog.
I fear is in retreat. And in the interest of comedy, my friends, but also in the interest of truth, I will admit
Notice how no one is laughing.
that sometimes the loudest voices for censorship have come not from within Europe, but from within my own country, where the prior administration threatened and bullied social media companies to censor so-called misinformation. Misinformation like, for example, the idea that coronavirus had likely leaked from a laboratory in China. Our own government encouraged private companies to silence people who dared to utter what turned out to be an obvious truth.
No. The things that got censored on social media were misinformation about vaccines and treatments, not lab leak theories. Get it right.
So I come here today not just with an observation, but with an offer. And just as the Biden administration seemed desperate to silence people for speaking their minds, so the Trump administration will do precisely the opposite, and I hope that we can work together on that.
Now, real quick, before we continue, listen to how quiet that room is right now.
Will do precisely the opposite, and I hope that we can work together on that. In Washington,
Just very quiet. Now, real quick.
Munich, and we are very much looking forward to his speech. Please welcome Vice President J.D. Vance.
well, thank you, and thanks to all the gathered delegates and luminaries and media professionals, and thanks especially to the host of the Munich Security Conference for being able to put on such an incredible event. We're, of course, thrilled to be here. We're happy to be here. And, you know, one of the things that I wanted to talk about today is, of course, our shared values. And, you know, it's great to be back in Germany. As you heard earlier, I was here last year as United States Senator. I saw Foreign Secretary David Lammy and joked that both of us last year had different jobs than we have now. But now it's time for all of our countries, for all of those who have been to use fortunate to improve to spend some so healing from yesterday. My wife, actually, who's here with me today, on a personal trip. And I've always loved the city of Munich, and I've always loved its people and everybody affected for you. Be rooting for you in the days and weeks to come. Now,
see, before he goes into like a real heavy speech here, they're more than willing to clap after something he said.
I hope that's not the last bit of applause that I get, but
they're more than willing to laugh at what he's saying. But suddenly, you can hear a fucking pin drop in this room.
Together on that. In Washington, there is a new sheriff in town, and under Donald Trump's leadership, we may disagree with your views, but we will fight to defend your right to offer it in the public square, agree or disagree.
Just real quick.
To offer it in the public square, agree or disagree.
Silence. A silent beat, much less
Now we're at the point,
applause.
of course, that the situation has gotten so bad that this December, Romania straight up canceled the results of a presidential election based on the flimsy suspicions of an intelligence agency and enormous pressure from its continental neighbors. Now, as I understand it, the argument was that Russian disinformation had infected the Romanian elections. But I'd ask my European friends to have some perspective. You can believe it's wrong for Russia to buy social media advertisements to influence your elections. We certainly do. You can condemn it on the world stage even. But if your democracy can be destroyed with a few $100,000 of digital advertising from a foreign country, then it wasn't very strong to begin with.
What? This is one of the biggest self-reports I've ever heard in my life. Guys, let's see if I can break this down real quick. He's saying, if you can topple a democracy, then I guess it wasn't a strong enough democracy to continue to exist. Which is very much in the camp of, it was good to topple it. You know? That's what he's saying. He's saying if fascism can topple the democracy, the fascism deserves to be in charge. Also, and I'm just throwing this out there, the courts are part of the political system of a country. So if the courts step in to protect the democracy, that's the democracy working. So you might say, oh, it didn't take much to topple democracy in Romania. But democracy wasn't toppled. The system worked as intended. It restored democracy when the threat of being toppled happened. That's good. Is there really only one guy in that audience clapping?
Then it wasn't very strong to begin with. Now,
I hadn't watched this yet. I just knew that this was like the catalyst point here. Yeah, guys, we're watching the United States alienate every single ally we have in Europe. With the exception of maybe Hungary and Russia. Flow Snake, I'm putting you in timeout because I don't know what the hell's going on with you, but like you've been really weird this stream.
The good news is that I happen to think your democracies are substantially less brittle than many people apparently fear. And I really do believe that allowing our citizens to speak their mind will make them stronger still. Which, of course, brings us back to Munich, where the organizers of this very conference have banned lawmakers representing populist parties on both the left and the right from participating in these conversations. Now, again, we don't have to agree with everything or anything that people say. But when people represent, when political leaders represent an important constituency, it is incumbent upon us to at least participate in dialogue with them. Now, to many of us on the other side of the Atlantic, it looks more and more like old entrenched interests hiding behind ugly Soviet-era words like misinformation and disinformation.
Yes, all of the communists of Europe.
Who simply don't like the idea that somebody with an alternative viewpoint might express a different opinion or, God forbid...
Hey, just out of curiosity, is there someone, I don't know, some kind of political orientation in Europe that may have emerged in, say, the 1930s or 40s that basically everyone despises? That he's oddly enough not mentioning? You know, who can say?
Vote a different way, or even worse, win an election. Now, this is a security conference, and I'm sure you all came here prepared to talk about how exactly you intend to increase defense spending over the next few years in line with some new target. And that's great, because as President Trump has made abundantly clear, he believes that our European friends must play a bigger role in the future of this continent. We don't think you hear that.
Yeah, he literally is trying to make the lesser of two evils argument, but between like Soviet Russia and Nazi Germany, and the Nazis are the less bad option. Ignoring the fact that it's not a binary thing.
This term, burden sharing, but we think it's an important part of being in a shared alliance together that the Europeans step up while America focuses on areas of the world that are in great danger. But let me also ask you, how will you even begin to think through the kinds of budgeting questions if we don't know what it is that we're defending in the first place? I've heard a lot already in my conversations, and I've had many, many great conversations with many people gathered here in this room. I've heard a lot about what you need to defend yourselves from, and of course that's important. But what has seemed a little bit less clear to me, and certainly I think to many of the citizens of Europe, is what exactly it is that you're defending yourselves for. What is the positive vision that...
Why are you bothering to defend yourselves? I don't understand. Why are you as societies defending yourselves? Why aren't you just allowing yourselves to be invaded?
That animates this shared security compact that we all believe is so important. And I believe deeply that there is no security if you are afraid of the voices, the opinions, and the conscience that guide your very own people. Europe faces many challenges, but
the condescension that is dripping off of this man right now is wild. This man deserves, like, has never deserved in his life to condescend to anyone.
The crisis this continent faces right now, the crisis I believe we all face together, is one of our own making. If you're running in fear of your own voters, there is nothing America can do for you. Nor, for that matter, is there anything that you can do for the American people who elected me and elected President Trump. You need democratic mandates to accomplish anything of value in the coming years. Have we learned nothing that thin mandates...
Yeah, none of you European assholes are real democracies.
...produce unstable results, but there is so much of value that can be accomplished with the kind of democratic...
Honestly, someone brave in that audience should have stood up and pied him in the face.
Mandate that I think
we need to bring back political pieing. I think that's an important thing we in our modern era miss out on.
Will come from being more responsive to the voices of your citizens. If you're going to enjoy competitive economies, if you're going to enjoy affordable energy and secure supply chains, then you need mandates to govern.
Dude, he's implicitly threatening all of those things. Like, you understand that, right? Like, what he's saying is that you guys can't have these things, all of which you already have, unless you know, do a little bit of the fascism.
Because you have to make difficult choices to enjoy all of these things. And of course, we know that very well in America. You cannot win a democratic mandate by censoring your opponents or putting them in jail. Whether that's the leader of the opposition, a humble Christian praying in her own home, or a journalist trying to report the news. Nor can you win one by disregarding your basic electorate on questions like who gets to be a part of our shared society. And of all the pressing challenges that the nations represented here face, I believe there is nothing more urgent than mass migration. Today, almost 1 in 5 people...
Nothing more urgent than people moving? Are you kidding me? Dog.
Living in this country moved here from abroad. That is...
And
of course, an all-time high.
So?
It's a similar number, by the way, in the United States, also an all-time high. The number of immigrants who entered the EU from non-EU countries doubled between 2021 and 2022 alone, and of course, it's gotten much higher since.
And? So what? That's more people to do more work. You understand that that's good, right?
And we know the situation, it didn't materialize in a vacuum. It's the result of a series of conscious decisions made by politicians all over the continent and others across the world over the span of a decade. We saw the horrors wrought by these decisions yesterday in this very city. And of course, I can't bring it up again.
Yeah, because native-born people would never do horrible things. Yeah, because if you look up the statistics, native-born people, it's not like they're more predisposed to doing horrific things than immigrants. Oh, wait, they are! Native-born people commit way more crime proportionally than immigrants. Crazy how that works.
Without thinking about the terrible victims who had a beautiful winter day in Munich ruined, our thoughts and prayers are with them and will remain with them. But why did this happen in the first place? It's a terrible story, but it's one we...
Well, climate change, destabilizations that happened abroad as a result of U.S. Imperial interference, or European imperial interference, or Chinese imperial interference. A lot of different types of interference happening here.
We've heard way too many times in Europe, and unfortunately too many times in the United States as well. An asylum seeker, often a...
This is standard rhetoric of an abuser. He's reversing victim and abuser, trying to convince potential victims that what he's doing is for their own good. Actually, veiled threats,
no, it's true.
Invalidating victims, European Democrat.
No, that's exactly what he's trying to do. He's trying to, look what you made me do. He's doing that because in a couple months, they're going to, maybe next month, maybe a few weeks, they're going to drop European tariffs. Absolutely.
A young man in his mid-20s, already known to police, rams a car into a crowd and shatters a community. How many...
Yeah, it's not like Americans born in America have never done that. Don't Google Timothy McVeigh.
How many times must we suffer these appalling setbacks before we change?
We need to lock down Americans until we get to the bottom of what's going on here.
Course and take our shared civilization in a new direction. No voter on this continent went to the ballot box to open the floodgates to millions of unvetted immigrants. But you know what they did vote for? In England, they voted for Brexit, and agree or disagree, they voted for it. And more all over Europe, they're voting for political leaders who promise to put an end to out-of-control migration. Now, I happen to agree with a lot of these concerns, but you don't have to agree with me. I just think that people care about their homes, they care about their dreams, they care about their safety and their capacity to provide for themselves and their children. And they're smart. I think this is one of the most important things I've learned in my brief time in politics. Contrary to what you might hear a couple mountains over in Davos, the citizens of all of our nations don't generally think of themselves as educated animals or as interchangeable cogs of a global...
What the fuck? I'm sorry, what is this language?
Things I've learned in my brief time in politics. Contrary to what you might hear a couple mountains over in Davos, the citizens of all of our nations don't generally think of themselves as educated animals or as interchangeable cogs of a global economy.
They don't have to, because that's how the system treats them. That's That's the issue. You don't have to have someone telling you you are a cog in the machine if functionally you are being treated as a cog.
And it's hardly surprising that they don't want to be shuffled about or relentlessly ignored by their leaders. And it is the business of democracy to adjudicate these big questions at the ballot box. I believe that dismiss.
You know, I didn't put it together, Robert Adset, but genuinely there is a decent chance that could be anti-evolution language. There's a genuine shot he's taking like aim at evolution as a concept.
People dismissing their concerns, or worse yet, shutting down media, shutting down elections, or shutting people out of the political process protects nothing. In fact, it is the most surefire way to destroy democracy. And speaking up and expressing opinions isn't election interference. Even when people express views outside your own country, and even when those people are very influential. And trust me, I say this with all humor.
You know, genuinely, it's really bizarre to hear him say this, because I, as a streamer, feel deeply unsafe when I sometimes talk about these political issues, because in this country, in the current time period we're in, I do not feel like the US government genuinely gives me free speech. I do not feel like that. As somebody who makes content and talks about politics, I do not feel completely free to say what I think about politics. So his words on that, in that regard, feel very hollow.
American and express views outside your own country, and even when those people are very influential. And trust me, I say this with all humor. If American democracy can survive 10 years.
Oh, God. Oh, One-Eyed Heathen. I don't know why why it's not reading it out, but in the book on tyranny, the author Timothy, I almost said Timothy Chalamet, Timothy Snyder, mentions that fascism makes no sense and is not meant to. One abuse tactic my mother used was to overtly utter layers of nonsense to confuse the fuck out of me. Yep. The bafflement is absolutely deliberate, which is why I've tried to limit how much we focus on on what Donald Trump is saying. I've made a deliberate effort to limit that in these streams. The issue with, and the reason we're covering this, is because what he says actually carries weight and matters in the decision making of other countries, you know?
Years of Greta Thunberg scolding, you guys can survive a few months of Elon Musk. But
oh, he paused for a laugh. Dude.
You guys can survive a few months of Elon Musk.
Dog, he actually paused thinking he was going to get a laugh. He tried to dunk on Greta Thunberg and like, you're talking about a literal like autistic 20-something versus the richest, arguably one of the most powerful men in the entire world. That's crazy, dog. That is crazy. Yeah, 10 years of the fascist authoritarian rule of an angry young adult. Are you fucking kidding me, dog? This guy's going to be so cooked by his kids when they grow up.
But what German democracy, what no democracy, American, German, or European, will survive is telling millions of voters that their thoughts and concerns, their aspirations, their pleas for relief are invalid or unworthy of even being considered. Democracy rests on the sacred principle that the voice of the people matters. There's no room for firewalls. You either uphold the principle or you don't. Europeans, the people, have a voice. European leaders have a choice. And my strong belief is that we do not need to be afraid of the future. You can embrace what your people tell you, even when it's surprising, even when you don't agree. And if you do so, you can face the future with...
Wait, did he say a few months? Slip of the tongue. Well, the argument that they're making is that Elon Musk is that they were making was that Elon Musk was a special temporary government employee who was only going to be working with the government for a few months and then was going to fuck off. They've dropped that pretense.
Certainty and with confidence, knowing that the nation stands behind each of you. And that, to me, is the great magic of democracy. It's not in these stone buildings or beautiful hotels. It's not even in the great institutions that we have built together as a shared society. To believe in democracy is to understand that each of our citizens has wisdom and has a voice. And if we refuse to listen to that voice, even our most successful fights will secure very little. As Pope John Paul II, in my view, one of the most extraordinary champions of democracy on this continent or any other, once said.
It's right. J.D. Vance claims to be a Catholic, but he's been admonished by the Pope multiple times now. It's crazy.
Do not be afraid. We shouldn't be afraid of our people, even when they express views that disagree with their leadership. Thank you all. Good luck to all of you. God bless you.
Yeah. That was a bridge burning, if I've ever seen one. And folks, it hasn't gone unnoticed. This is literally an op-ed that ran in Foreign Policy yesterday, or an argument, which is their version of an op-ed. It's time for Europe to do the unthinkable. European and global policy experts are now basically opining at length, in depth, that there needs to be an official break from the United States.
Ah, yes, J.D. Vance. Famously a champion of democracy.
France called an emergency meeting. I'm not surprised. I would too immediately after this. Can we ever come back from this? Sure. We can always come back from basically anything. The issue is, can we come back from it in a short amount of time? No. And this is something I think a lot of Republicans don't yet understand. In many cases, sometimes when you break a thing, it stays broken. You can't just go to the store and buy another one. Sometimes the thing you have, you break it, and it's the only one of its kind. And then you either let it rot, you throw it away, or you painstakingly glue it back together. But either way, it's going to be a while. You guys are going to be the new villains for a long time. Hey, you know what? We know it. We know it. But I know we got a lot of people outside the United States watching. For my part, I'm going to do my best whatever I can do, whatever strength is in these arms and legs and voice. I think you can maybe still tell I'm very hoarse from screaming from the rooftops about this. But we're going to do our best to turn things around. Can't guarantee you we'll succeed, but we're going to try.